In just 43 seconds, Jasmine Crockett delivered a revelation so explosive that it shattered Donald Trump's composure on live television, exposing a family secret that would change everything. The moment she spoke those words, Trump's carefully constructed facade crumbled before millions of viewers as he launched into a personal attack that revealed his true character. But how did Crockett maintain her grace under such intense pressure? And what was this bombshell that left the president spiraling? The tension in the congressional hearing room was suffocating as Representative Jasmine Crockett adjusted her microphone, her eyes never leaving the figure seated across from her. President Donald Trump sat rigid in the witness chair, his usual bravado replaced by something far more unsettling, a barely contained fury that seemed to pulse beneath his orange-tinged skin. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows across his face, emphasizing every line of frustration as he gripped the arms of his chair. "Mr. President," Crockett began, her voice cutting through the murmur of the packed gallery like a blade through silk. "We've heard your testimony regarding your business dealings, your tax records, and your various legal entanglements. But there's one matter that remains conspicuously absent from your sworn statements today." Trump's jaw tightened visibly as he leaned forward slightly, his small hands clasping together on the polished wooden table before him. "Representative Crockett, I've been more than generous with my time and transparency. I've answered every single question you've thrown at me, despite the obvious bias and witch hunt mentality that permeates these proceedings." The gallery stirred with whispers as Crockett maintained her composure, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She had been preparing for this moment for months, meticulously gathering evidence, cross-referencing documents, and building an airtight case. The manila folder before her contained information that would change the trajectory of this hearing and potentially the presidency itself. "Your generosity is noted, Mr. President, but transparency requires complete honesty, doesn't it?" Crockett's fingers drummed silently against the folder's edge as she watched Trump's reaction carefully. "You've spoken extensively about your children, Donald Jr., Eric, Ivanka, Tiffany, and Barron. You've praised their accomplishments, their loyalty, their contributions to your legacy." Trump's eyes narrowed to slits as he processed where this line of questioning might be heading. "My children are off limits, Representative. They're private citizens who have nothing to do with these proceedings. If you think you can drag my family into your political theater, you're sadly mistaken." "I agree completely that families should be protected, Mr. President." Which makes it all the more puzzling why you've chosen to completely omit one family member from every single public statement, financial disclosure, and even your own memoir. Crockett opened the folder slowly, deliberately, allowing the suspense to build as cameras zoomed in on her every movement. The room fell into an almost supernatural quiet, with only the soft whir of air conditioning and the distant click of camera shutters breaking the silence. Trump's breathing had become slightly labored, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that suggested barely controlled panic. "I have no idea what you're referring to," Trump said through gritted teeth, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that carried clearly through the microphone system. "You're fishing, Representative, and it's beneath the dignity of this institution." Crockett pulled out a birth certificate, holding it up so the cameras could capture it clearly. "This is a certified copy of a birth certificate filed in New York State 28 years ago. The mother's name is Maria Santos, a former employee at Trump Tower who worked in housekeeping from 1994 to 1997. Trump's face had gone from its usual orange hue to a sickly pale color, beads of sweat forming along his hairline despite the cool temperature of the room. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass, nearly knocking it over in the process. "The father's name listed here," Crockett continued, her voice gaining strength as she witnessed Trump's visible distress, "is Donald John Trump. The child's name is Sophia Maria Santos Trump. And according to these sealed court documents that were recently unsealed due to a Freedom of Information Act request, you've been paying child support for 27 years. The gallery erupted into chaos, with reporters frantically typing on their phones and laptops, while others shouted questions that were immediately gavelled down by the committee chair. Trump's legal team huddled around him, whispering urgently, but he waved them off with an aggressive gesture. "This is a complete fabrication," Trump snarled, his voice rising to a near shout that caused feedback through the sound system. "Maria Santos was a disgruntled employee who was terminated for theft. Any documents bearing my name are forgeries, and I'll be filing defamation lawsuits against everyone involved in this charade." But Crockett wasn't finished. She produced another document, this one bearing official seals and signatures. These are bank records, Mr. President, showing monthly payments of $5,000 from a Trump Organization account to an account held in trust for Sophia Santos Trump. The payments began in December of 1996 and continue to this day. Trump shot to his feet so violently that his chair rolled backward, crashing into the wall behind him. His face had transformed into a mask of pure rage, veins bulging at his temples as he pointed an accusatory finger directly at Crockett. "You want to play dirty, Representative? Let's talk about your own family," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the chamber walls. "Let's talk about your brother's drug arrests, your mother's bankruptcy, your own student loan defaults. You want to drag innocent people into this circus? We can drag everyone." The committee chair banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order, but Trump continued his tirade, completely abandoning any pretense of presidential dignity. Security personnel began moving closer to the witness table as Trump's voice grew louder and more unhinged with each passing second. Crockett remained perfectly still during Trump's outburst, her hands folded calmly on the table as his voice reached a fever pitch that seemed to shake the very foundations of the chamber. The contrast was striking, his wild gesticulations and contorted facial expressions against her serene composure, creating a visual that would be replayed on news networks for weeks to come. "Mr. President," she said quietly, her voice somehow cutting through his shouting with surgical precision, "your attempts to deflect with personal attacks only serve to confirm what we already know. Sophia Santos Trump is your daughter, and you've spent nearly 3 decades hiding her existence from the American people." Trump's face had progressed beyond red into a disturbing purple hue, spittle forming at the corners of his mouth as he continued his verbal assault. "This woman, this so-called representative, is nothing more than a partisan hack who would destroy innocent lives to score political points. She's a disgrace to her office, a disgrace to her constituents, and frankly, a disgrace to basic human decency." The gallery had descended into complete pandemonium, with some spectators on their feet shouting support for Crockett, while others defended Trump. Camera flashes strobed continuously as photographers captured every moment of what was rapidly becoming one of the most explosive congressional hearings in American history. But Crockett had saved her most devastating revelation for last. She reached into her folder one final time and withdrew a photograph, holding it up for all to see. It showed a young woman with unmistakably familiar features, Trump's distinctive jawline and piercing eyes, standing beside an older Latina woman in what appeared to be a graduation ceremony setting. "This is Sophia at her graduation from Columbia Law School last year," Crockett announced, her voice carrying clearly over the chaos. "She graduated summa cum laude and is currently working as a public defender in the Bronx, representing the kind of immigrants and working-class families that you've spent your entire political career demonizing." The photograph seemed to drain all the fight out of Trump momentarily. He stared at it with an expression that cycled through recognition, pain, and finally, renewed fury. His hands clenched into fists at his sides as he struggled to find words that wouldn't further incriminate him. "She chose her path," he said finally, his voice now barely above a whisper, but somehow more menacing than his previous shouting. "If someone wants to reject their family, reject the opportunities and advantages that come with the Trump name, that's their choice. I don't owe anyone an explanation for respecting someone's decision to cut ties." Crockett shook her head slowly, a gesture that conveyed both disappointment and determination. "According to these legal documents, Mr. President, Sophia didn't cut ties with you. You cut ties with her. When she turned 18 and could legally make her own decisions, she attempted to establish a relationship with you. These are copies of letters she sent, phone records showing unanswered calls, even security footage from Trump Tower showing her being turned away by your staff." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the most hardened political observers in the gallery seemed stunned by the cruelty that Crockett's evidence revealed. Trump stood frozen behind the witness table, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish gasping for air. "She wrote to you when she graduated high school, asking only for acknowledgement. For the chance to know her father," Crockett continued, her voice taking on an edge of righteous anger that had been carefully controlled until now. "She wrote when she started college, when she graduated, when she got engaged, when her mother was diagnosed with cancer. 28 years of child support payments, but not one moment of actual fatherhood." Trump's composure finally snapped completely. He lurched forward, gripping the edge of the witness table so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "You know nothing about my family, about the complexities of my life, about the pressures I face every single day. You sit there in your cheap suit with your political ambitions and you judge me? But you've never built an empire, never created jobs for millions of people, never shouldered the responsibility of leading the greatest nation on earth. The committee chair had given up trying to restore order, recognizing that this moment would define not just the hearing, but potentially the remainder of Trump's presidency. Security personnel flanked the witness table now, ready to intervene if Trump's agitation escalated to physical confrontation. Crockett stood slowly, her movement drawing every eye in the chamber. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of moral authority that comes from speaking truth to power without flinching. Mr. President, you're right about one thing. I've never built an empire, but I've also never abandoned a child. I've never paid money to silence the existence of my own flesh and blood. And I've certainly never stood before the American people and lied about the most basic facts of my own family. The final blow came when she reached for one last document, this one bearing the official seal of the New York Family Court. This is a restraining order filed by Sophia Santos Trump 3 years ago, requesting that you cease all attempts to contact her through intermediaries, cease having her followed by private investigators, and cease any efforts to interfere with her career or personal life. Trump's legs seemed to give out beneath him as he collapsed back into his chair, the fight completely drained from his body. The transformation was startling, from the raging tyrant of moments before to a deflated old man whose carefully constructed public image lay in ruins around him. The American people deserve to know who their president really is, Crockett concluded, gathering her documents with methodical precision. Not the persona crafted by public relations teams and social media managers, but the man who would deny his own daughter's existence rather than face the inconvenient truth of his own failures as a father. The hearing room remained silent for several long seconds before erupting into the loudest cacophony yet. Reporters rushed toward the exits, desperate to break the story that would dominate headlines for months to come. Trump's legal team surrounded him, creating a human barrier as they whispered urgent strategies for damage control. But the damage was already done. In 43 seconds, Jasmine Crockett had accomplished what years of investigations, impeachment proceedings, and legal battles had failed to achieve. She had revealed the man behind the myth, stripped away the pretense, and shown the world that even the most powerful person in the country couldn't escape the consequences of his own choices. As the cameras continued rolling and the chaos swirled around them, Crockett packed her briefcase with the same calm efficiency she had displayed throughout the entire ordeal. She had done her job, upheld her oath to serve the American people, and spoken truth to power in its rawest, most unfiltered form. The ripple effects would be felt for years to come, but in that moment, justice had been served with the precision of a surgeon's blade and the force of a hurricane. Trump's legacy would never recover from this exposure, and Jasmine Crockett had cemented her place in history as the person brave enough to hold even the president accountable for his most personal failures. If this story of courage and truth resonates with you, make sure to subscribe for more incredible political moments that changed history. And tell me in the comments, what do you think should happen when our leaders fail to live up to the most basic standards of human decency?